I don't know if you heard our list, but I'd love to know how you think we did on it.
I mean, it's hard to argue. I'm not, I'm not enough of a historian to go back and say, well, this team was better than that team or whatever. But I think that the five that I heard you guys mention, I don't think I would have too much argument with any one of them being in any position in the top five. Although that '98 Yankees team was pretty good.
So we put the '95 Braves on there, won the World Series. Was there possibly another Braves team in that era that was better than the '95 team?
I would say if there was, it may have been the '93 team. I feel like that team was pretty loaded. We won 104 games. We had a really good offensive club. I think the problem with us that year was, that was the year we chased down the Giants and ended up winning the division on the last day of the season. And so I think more than anything, we were just kind of emotionally and physically worn out after the chase of the second half of the season. So when we got into the playoffs, I think we were a little out of gas.
The Hall of Famer Tom Glavine is joining us. Am I right about this? Was that Maddox's first year with you guys?
I think you are right about that.
Okay.
Yes, I think that was his first year. Yeah.
I mean, obviously the Braves had success before that earlier in the '90s, but when Maddox got there and you realize, okay, look at what we have at the top of our rotation with Maddox, with yourself, obviously, and then with Smoltz, where you're like, oh, we're gonna win 5 titles.
Yeah, probably some of that. I mean, I think, the ironic thing about that was, that winter, the whole winter, it was rumored that we were going to sign Barry Bonds. And that was kind of the guy that we were going after, supposedly. And it seemed like it was all but a done deal. And I remember going somewhere in my car the night that it was announced that we got Greg. And I was, my first reaction was, first you're like, oh, my God. And second, to your point, you started thinking about, all right, we've got a pretty good rotation already. And now we're adding this guy. Like, this is going to be really good. And, there's obviously excitement with that in terms of thinking, okay, well, yeah, what can we accomplish with this group? And if, we've been pretty good up to this point, where's this going to take us? And, it ultimately led to a World Series. And certainly we probably could have had 1 or 2 more, but it was, it was an exciting time, obviously, but it was also a fun time for us as players, adding a guy like that and seeing what he meant to our team.
I'm just curious, were you friends with Maddox before he got there? And how quickly did sort of you and Smoltzy and the rest of the staff become, famous for golfing together all the time and good buddies?
I mean, I didn't know Greg. I obviously knew him a little bit from competing against him, obviously, and you'd say hi from time to time and things like that. But didn't really know him. But, I think obviously the biggest commonality was golf. And I think that made it really easy for us, not only to welcome him, because, look, it's never easy going to a new team. I don't care how established you are. You got to meet new people, make new friends. You got to figure the landscape out. So I think, for us having that bond of playing golf, I think it made it real easy for him. And it made it real easy for us to get to know him pretty quickly, and it was, pretty seamless and pretty quick that we recognized that, okay, this guy is going to be a really good fit. He's a good dude. He's funny. This is going to be a good situation.
Are all the hygiene stories about Greg Maddox, that's all true, I'm assuming?
Most of them. He denies a lot of them now. He tries to say, it's funny how you're out of the game for 20 years and all these stories, come up or get bigger or whatever. And it's like, no, Greg, most of them are true. You just don't want to remember them.
The Hall of Famer Tom Glavine is joining us as we're talking about the greatest baseball teams of the last 30 years. Now, what I think is really interesting also, Tom, is that '95 Cleveland team that you guys beat in the World Series. That team could have been on this list. I mean, that team was incredible.
They were. I mean, to this day, I still say that's the best offensive team I've ever faced from top to bottom. I mean, you look at that lineup, and there's several Hall of Famers in that lineup. They were stacked, and they were pretty balanced in the sense that, obviously with Kenny Lofton leading off and the threat of the stolen base all the time, then you had virtually everybody else in the lineup could hit home runs. So it was a tough lineup to navigate. One of those as a pitcher. It's the challenge of you always try to dissect the lineup in 2 ways. First and foremost, you're trying to pick out one or two guys that you don't want to let beat you.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you do that, then you're looking for outs, So, okay, if I got to walk this guy or pitch around this guy, where am I getting my next out from? And when you can't do that in a lineup, it makes it really tough, because there's obviously a couple. You could easily pick 3 or 4 guys in that lineup that you say, hey, I don't want to let this guy beat me. But then once you identify those guys, like I'm saying, it's like, okay, if I'm going to walk this guy, if I'm going to walk, say Carlos Baerga, okay, well, now I got to pitch to Eddie Murray or Jim Tomei, so it's not like I've severely increased my odds in any way, shape, or form.
So, Tom, how'd you figure them out for that closeout game? I mean, you were brilliant in that game. You went 8 innings. No earned runs, 8 strikeouts. I mean, you were fantastic. How'd you figure them out in the biggest stage possible?
I don't know that it was just really a sense of figuring them out. It was just I happened to have the best game of my life at that moment. I obviously you have a scouting report for teams and certain things you're going to try and do maybe against certain hitters. But look, at that stage of the game, my game plan was not complicated, right? I was pitching away. I was trying to pitch the contact away, whether it was with my sinker or my changeup. I was trying to make teams have to get 3 hits to score a run, not give up a home run. And so that was, and I'm going to sprinkle inside here and there to try and strike guys out or keep guys honest. So it wasn't that I figured them out, so to speak, or had some complicated game plan. It was just that I executed my game plan that night as good as I could have possibly executed it. And, there's something to be said for timing, right? I mean, it was the perfect time to do it. And I look back over my career. There's probably 2 other games that technically were close to that game, but given the circumstances and the stage and all that stuff, it makes it easy to say it was the greatest game of my life.
Talking to Tom Glavine, Hall of Famer. We're putting together this list, and if obviously it's too premature because it's the All-Star break, but we're watching the All-Star coverage, and this Atlanta Braves team right now, they don't even have their ace, and it still feels like they could be on a list someday of the greatest teams ever. I know they won the championship recently.
Yeah, the 2021 team could be on this list.
I feel like the 2021 certainly, but this team feels even more dominant. I mean, how do you compare the current Braves to some of your great Braves teams?
Certainly right there. It's always obviously difficult to compare eras, I think, but you look at this lineup and like I was saying earlier about dissecting the Indians lineup. Well, that's what the Braves lineup is like, right? There's nobody to pitch around. There's nowhere you can go to hunt for outs when this lineup is rolling, and it's just a really, really daunting task for opposing pitchers to try and navigate through that lineup. And look, they have a nice balance of speed, obviously, with Ronald at the top of the lineup and Michael Harris at the bottom of the lineup, and then they've got that nice mixture of guys who can hit for average and power throughout the middle of the lineup. And, they're rolling. I mean, you're more surprised when you turn on the TV and they lose a game than you are when they win a game. You're almost shocked if they get through the first inning without having scored at least 2 or 3 runs. It's been amazing to watch. And to your point, they've done so much of it without, their 2 studs at the top of their rotation and Max Fried and Kyle Wright. So, I don't know with the trading deadline. I don't know what you could do really to improve this team. I think there are always things you can try to do. But if you're the Braves right now, you're thinking, okay, here we're in this position here. Max Fried, I believe, threw a bullpen yesterday, so he's getting ready to throw another one. And soon after that, I'm sure we'll be on rehab start. So when you get him back, that's almost like you've made a huge trading deadline trade to bolster your club. So, I think that's only going to make them even tougher. But, that offense is it's pretty spectacular, to say the least.
Tom, 2 more quick ones for you. One about Shohei Ohtani. How much longer can he keep this up of pitching and hitting? Obviously, none of his teams are making it on these top 5 greatest teams of all time, but he's maybe one of the most exciting players we've seen in a long time.
I think we've been asking that question about him for a couple of years now, and he only seems to be getting better at both facets of the game. Now, I don't think there's any question that if he focused on one, he would probably be, even better at it and maybe one of the best, if not the best in the game at that particular position. But, hey, when you're producing the way he is on both sides of the baseball, why stop doing it? I think he may have to eventually due to age, but It doesn't look like he's slowing down anytime soon.
Tom, you're being, by the way, modest. Obviously, if you had known this was an option, because Chick-Sick the long ball, you would have been a hitter as well, right?
Of course. I mean, I think we all strive to do that and dreamt of doing it. Just he happens to be doing it at a very level.
Tom, last one for you, going back to some of the 90s teams. One of your former teammates, who we don't talk about much when it comes to the greatest teams, but we just talk about him a lot in general, and that's Deion Sanders. When you're playing with him on the Braves, did you ever think, oh, he's going to become a college football coach one day?
You know what? Maybe not, but I think with Deion, you never knew what Deion was going to do, right? You knew he was going to do something. I'm not the least surprised that after his playing days, he went into broadcasting because he was, just very charismatic guy and brought a lot of did. And, he was really good at the broadcasting side of thing and breaking stuff down and doing it in a fun way for people to watch. And, I'm equally not surprised he's done well as a coach. I mean, I think great athletes have something innate about them that whenever they take on a challenge, they're going to do everything they can to be successful at that challenge. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to happen, but I think Deion's one of those guys. If he puts his mind to something, he's going to give it his all. He's going to do everything he possibly can do to be successful, and he's done it so far. So it'll be interesting to see with this next jump of his going to Colorado and how that all works out, but I'm not going to bet against him.